The substitute teacher accused of sleeping with a student speaks again.
When you like a person, especially, there's a physiological response that happens. It's not like I asked to enjoy it.
But you did.
Well, yeah, I mean...
Haglin admitted to the relationship in June in an interview.
Mary Beth Haglin graduated from Cole College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa in the year 2014 with 2 degrees, one in English and another in Spanish. She was reportedly awarded a prestigious Fulbright scholarship to study in Bulgaria, but for unspecified reasons chose not to accept the award. She was planning on a career in teaching and eventually getting married and having kids. In the fall of 2015, she began working as a substitute teacher at various schools in Cedar Rapids. Cedar Rapids is a city of about 130,000 people, a little over 100 miles east of Iowa's capital city, Des Moines. Mary Beth was employed through an agency that provided personnel for area schools. One of the schools she'd been assigned to that fall was Washington High School. A 17-year-old student in one of her classes there had taken an interest in her. I'll refer to him as Mark. She had met Mark the previous school year when she'd worked at Washington as a student teacher. That fall, the teacher and the kid connected on Facebook.
He was a good student, and I always like to reconnect with my better students.
Soon the young man was asking the woman to go out with him for lunch or for coffee or something. She refused. He was persistent though. He asked again. Mary Beth continued to decline his invitations. Days and weeks passed, and Miss Haglin continued to work at a few different schools. Mary Beth has said that she was in an abusive relationship around that time. She said that one evening, she and her boyfriend had a particularly nasty argument. The next day, she picked up her phone, and perhaps out of anger, and possibly a bit of vindictiveness, she messaged Mark and informed him that she would be working at Washington High, his school, that day.
I looked at his message and I thought, I'm just gonna respond. Nothing intense, nothing like that, just casual. Hey, I'm gonna be subbing at your school today.
Mark came by Miss Haglin's classroom and said hi that day. From there, they began corresponding more frequently. One day in October, Mary Beth and Mark went to a corn maze together in a town not far from Cedar Rapids. The two then went to a place called Beaver Park. Yes, the place is actually called Beaver Park, and they sat there in his car and talked. Soon the two began kissing and touching one another. The heated interaction was interrupted though, as police happened to show up and approach the car to find out what was happening inside. Nevertheless, the illicit interaction between the pair would soon lead to repeated sexual intercourse. A few months later, in January, the young teacher was hired as a long-term substitute at Washington High. Mark was not a student in her class, but he would drop by and place handwritten flirtatious and adoring notes on her desk, in which he would sometimes refer to the teacher as his empress.
He would grab a Post-it, sit down, scribble a little note, and then stick it on my desk on his way out. I love you so much, my empress. He would always call me his empress.
As their sexual relationship continued, they had romantic text conversations in which he would profess to her, quote, "Trust me, it's not difficult to be a caring boyfriend, especially to someone as magnificent as you." Miss Haglin has said that young Mark swept her off her feet with his romantic gestures after he'd worn her down with his persistence. When they were alone in the classroom, the minor would try to initiate makeout sessions with the woman. Eventually, she gave in to his in-school advances, and they would have quote-unquote sexual contact on school grounds, though she says they never had sexual intercourse at school.
I can't. I've got practice.
After. I can meet you at the same place.
Okay.
However, the pair's carnal relationship had become quite heavy.
This is where a lot of our illicit activities happened.
She says they had sex almost every day in her car at this public park.
As the school year progressed, The two were engaging in sexual congress on a nearly daily basis.
Almost daily.
In her car at the aforementioned Beaver Park, sometimes in the teenager's car,
In his car, my car,
at his mother's house at times,
his mom's house,
and on other occasions at his father's house.
and his dad's house.
After the affair came to light, Miss Haglin once said that she couldn't count how many times she fornicated with the young student. She guessed that she'd copulated with the kid a few hundred times between October of 2015 and the end of the school year in June of 2016.
I can't even count. Perhaps a few hundred times.
Mary Beth has described Mark as a somewhat sophisticated young man and has said that he broke down her barriers slowly and manipulated her into accepting his affections.
The student twisted my brain into accepting this relationship. He did so with such intelligence and such an elevated vocabulary that I was completely duped by the whole facade.
According to Mary Beth, when she opened up to the youngster, that gave him more ammunition with which to finesse her. She had developed a level of trust toward him and felt that the thing that they had together was a real relationship.
I fell head over heels for him.
She said that Mark's age was quote-unquote erased in her mind during the time that they were involved. Although she's also said that she hoped that she could keep the forbidden affair a secret. She's also noted that Mark would sometimes compare their relationship to the one in the 1967 film The Graduate, in which an older woman, played by Anne Bancroft, has a sexual relationship with a much younger man, played by Dustin Hoffman.
I mean, you didn't really think I'd do something like that.
Like what?
What do you think?
Well, I don't know.
For God's sake, Mrs. Robinson. Here we are. You got me into your house. You give me a drink. You put on music. Now you start opening up your personal life to me and tell me your husband won't be home for hours.
So?
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
Ms. Haglin has said that she fell in love with Mark. She said at some point the young student convinced her to send him suggestive and spicy images, including some which showed the young teacher in the nude. She began sending him the pics because she trusted him, apparently, to keep them confidential. She would find out that her trust was misplaced when those pics began circulating among the student body. Soon, the spreading gossip of an affair between a student and a teacher reached the school administration, which conducted an investigation in February of 2016, which lasted only one day. Administrators interviewed Miss Haglin, Mark, and other students. Miss Haglin and Mark denied the relationship. At the conclusion of the inquiry, school officials would determine that the rumors were unfounded and no further action was taken at that time. The teacher apparently decided to continue her liaisons with the pupil despite the fact that he had shared the scandalous photos of her and regardless of the apparent breach of trust.
I didn't think that he was going to share them with his friends because in my mind, if you're in a real relationship, you don't just run around with your phone saying, hey, look, everybody, look how hot my girlfriend is.
On a Sunday afternoon in April, Miss Haglin and Mark were spending some time together. A pair of Washington high school students happened to see them sitting in her car outside a Smokin' Joe's tobacco and liquor outlet and took the liberty of capturing a video of the two together. That video ended up posted on Twitter for all the students at school to see, some of which began interrupting Miss Haglin's class to ask her about the controversy. Soon, school officials began a second investigation, and on May 17th, as the school year was coming to an end, Miss Haglin was told not to return to work. That month, the matter was reported to the Cedar Rapids Police Department, which opened its own investigation before the start of June. Meanwhile, the carnal contact between Mary Beth and Mark continued. At some point, Mary Beth tried to end things with Mark. Mark was having none of it. Miss Haglin has said that Mark told her that she would continue seeing him, and that if she tried to cut him off, he would tell. He would strike a match and burn her entire life to the ground, he said.
I will light a match and burn your life down.
Miss Haglin and Mark continued to see one another briefly, even after the initiation of the Cedar Rapids Police Department's into the alleged affair at the end of May. In June, the relationship finally came to an end. On July 22nd of 2016, Mary Beth Haglin was arrested on a single charge of sexual exploitation by a school employee. She would plead not guilty to the offense. She made bail and was released from the Lynn County Jail.
Mary Beth Haglin was arrested on Friday for sexual exploitation of a minor.
She was released from jail on Saturday and ordered to have no contact with the 17-year-old.
Mary Beth's misdeeds were a public spectacle in small Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and news outlets nationwide took notice of the story. As the scandal swelled, Ms. Haglin agreed to several media interviews with the apparent intention of defending her name. She spoke with local CBS affiliate KGAN and told the TV station, among other things, that Washington High School administrators knew that she and the student were sexually involved at the time of its initial investigation several months prior, in February, and chose to sweep the situation under the rug because it didn't want the school entangled in a scandal.
These people all knew what was going on, and yet they turned a blind eye because they wanted to protect their school. They didn't want it to get into the limelight.
Investigations conducted by the Cedar Rapids Community School District into Washington High School's handling of the matter led to the resignation of the longtime principal of the school and its vice principal that summer. Among Ms. Haglin's other interviews following her arrest, she had a recorded discussion with local ABC affiliate KCRG-TV and also one with a television and web program called Crime Watch Daily in September. In both of these interviews, she said, among other things, that she no longer had any desire to contact or see Mark ever again and didn't want him to contact her.
I never want to see him again.
However, in mid-September, Ms. Haglin was arrested again for violating the terms of her pretrial release by contacting Mark. Also, the young man came to visit her at her new place of employment on September 6th. After the young woman had been permanently banned from teaching, she took a job at a Cedar Rapids strip club called Woody's Show Club as an exotic dancer, where she went by the stage name Bambi. This is where Mark met up with the woman on the evening of September 6th. He had turned 18 by this time, but Bambi had nevertheless been prohibited by the court from having contact with him. Parts of the interaction between the two that night were caught on camera by Crime Watch Daily, the platform with which she had done an interview just days prior.
The couple locked in a deep conversation that lasted for about 30 minutes. But then the newly legal 18-year-old abruptly leaves. Could the two have had a lover's spat?
Crime Watch Daily also somehow obtained this video diary that Mary Beth had recently recorded, in which she professes her continued love for the youngster.
And it's only a few more weeks until my beloved turns 18. And then we can finally be together. I love you, my lobster.
Mary Beth apparently referred to the kid as her lobster, among other things, and he referred to her as his because apparently lobsters mate for life. Not only was her release revoked following the admissions in the interviews, her charge was upgraded from misdemeanor sexual exploitation, potential penalty 2 years in prison, to a count of felony sexual exploitation, potential penalty 5 years of incarceration. The elevation of the former teacher's charges was based primarily on statements she made in these interviews, according to prosecutors. Again, Mary Beth pleaded not guilty. However, in her many interviews, she'd admitted numerous times to having sexual relations with Mark, a minor at the school where she taught, in effect providing evidence that would aid the prosecution's case. Not long after she was released for the second time, she continued her media appearances. In October, she appeared on an episode of the Dr. Phil Show. Among other statements she made in that interview, she interestingly admitted that she enjoyed the intimacy she experienced with the young student, which is not something you typically hear stated by people who have pleaded not guilty to the crimes Mary Beth was accused of.
When you like a person, especially, there's a physiological response that happens. So it's not like I asked to enjoy it.
But you did.
Well, yeah, I mean...
In November, Ms. Haglin and her representation made a deal with the prosecutor's office and agreed to a bench trial where a judge would rule on the former teacher's guilt or innocence rather than a trial by jury. In exchange, the state agreed that it would forego the felony charge and that her interviews with media would be disregarded and would not be admitted as evidence. The judge would rule based on his review of testimony and case records previously presented in the proceedings, including an interview with Mark by Child Protective Services and a police interview with Ms. Haglin. Weeks later, on December 16th of 2016, 6th Judicial District Judge Kevin McKeever issued his ruling. He found Ms. Haglin guilty of an aggravated misdemeanor, that is sexual exploitation by a school employee. She was sentenced in February of 2017. She spoke to the court and apologized to the victim and his family prior to hearing her penalty.
I want to express my apologies to the student and his family. Not a right to hurt anybody.
Soon after, the judge announced his sentence: 360 days in jail. 270 of those days would be suspended. The disgraced teacher would be confined for 90 days, and upon completion of her incarceration, she would register as a sex offender and would remain in the registry for a period of 10 years. But the former teacher was not immediately remanded. She was ordered to report to jail within 6 months to serve her 90-day sentence. In March, just weeks after her sentencing, it was revealed that Mary Beth had a new career when video surfaced on an adult website of the disgraced educator performing in an X-rated film. Even after she'd served her time, Ms. Haglin would appeal the ruling in her case, saying she was not technically or officially a school employee at the time of her encounters with the victim, as her charge was exploitation by a school employee, not exploitation of a minor. On May 2nd of the year 2018, a panel of judges affirmed the former teacher's conviction. Thanks once again to all of you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you have thoughts, leave a comment. Thanks to all of you who already have. Thanks for helping me to keep this channel going. I'm working on an interesting video right now, which is a follow-up to a video that I did previously, and I think it's going to be one of the most interesting things that I've done. I'm really excited about it, and I can't wait to put it out. I'm not going to say what it's about just yet, but it should be very, very interesting, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks once again to all you guys for tuning in. Peace.